There is a light that does not shine from above. It kneels, it bends low, past the clouds, past judgment, past everything we thought we knew about holiness. It is the light of mercy, the moment heaven chooses compassion over condemnation, the moment eternity stoops down to touch what time tried to erase. You have felt that light before, even if you didn't recognize it. It was there when you should have been finished, when guilt had already written the ending, and yet somehow grace interrupted the script. It was there when you expected silence, but instead felt warmth. That warmth was not coincidence. It was heaven bending down to meet you. Because grace is not distant, it doesn't stay on thrones of light. It walks barefoot through your ashes, looking for what's left to redeem. It doesn't point from above, it kneels beside the broken and says, "Let's begin again." You see, justice stands tall, but mercy bows. It lowers itself, not in weakness, but in reverence for the human heart that still beats after failure. It's not heaven giving up its power, it's heaven showing what real power looks like. The kind that does not need to crush to prove its strength, but heals to reveal its authority. This is what the angels witnessed, a creator kneeling before creation, washing the dust from what he once formed with his hands. The same hands that shaped galaxies now tracing the tears on a mortal face. And for the first time in eternity, heaven itself wept. Not because of defeat, but because of love too vast to stay standing. That's the moment everything changed, when heaven didn't just look at you, it came close enough to touch. Close enough to lift your chin and say, "You are not what you did, you are what I'm restoring." And in that instant, the light didn't just shine on you, it entered you, and you became the reflection of a God who kneels to redeem what he refuses to lose. There is a kind of weight that does more than bend a human back, it bends heaven. Not because God is fragile, but because his heart refuses to stay unmoved when the soul he formed is crushed under what it was never designed to carry. You know that weight, the one made of regrets you can't rewrite, choices you wish you could unsay, nights you wish you could unlive. The kind of heaviness that doesn't just sit on your shoulders, it settles into your bones. You wake up tired. You go to sleep guilty, you breathe, but you don't really live. That was the weight that made heaven kneel, not your perfection, not your achievements, not your prayers said on good days with clean hands. It was your collapse, your "I ruined everything," your "I don't deserve another chance." Those sentences rang through eternity like alarms. You thought, God must be done with me. But those were the moments when heaven came closest, because mercy is magnetized by weakness. It is drawn to the places you hide. It does not stand on high ground shouting instructions. It descends into the valley and says, "I'll carry this with you." Justice could have stayed standing. It had every right to. It had evidence, timelines, witnesses, all the reasons why you should live with what you did. But mercy stepped forward and said, "I know the law, but I know their heart too." And in the courtroom of eternity, grace did the unthinkable. It knelt between you and your own consequences. That's the scandal of divine love. The judge lays aside his robes and takes the place of the condemned. The one who has no sin chooses to stand where the guilty should stand, so that the guilty can learn how to stand again. The highest throne in the universe became the lowest place on earth, simply because you were there. You may never fully understand this, but your life has been defended in rooms you've never seen. Your name has been spoken in tones of tenderness in courts where justice could have shouted you down. And every time the weight of your past threatened to crush your future, heaven remembered that moment. The moment it chose mercy over judgment, the moment it knelt. So, if you still feel the heaviness today, know this. You are not beneath that weight alone. The same hands that shaped the stars are under everything you think will break you. And the same light that bent down once has never stood back up and walked away. Mercy does not visit the perfect, it visits the wounded. It doesn't need gold or temples, it needs tears. The kneeling light searches for cracks, because that's where grace can enter and rebuild. And when it finds you, hiding, trembling, unsure. It doesn't scold, it stays. You wonder why heaven would stoop so low, why the infinite would move toward dust. But love cannot remain superior. Love must descend, or it ceases to be love at all. So the light that once filled the stars steps down into your ordinary hours, into your weakness, into your guilt, and whispers, "I'm still here." That whisper is not small. It's sacred. It's heaven rewriting its story through your survival. You are not the interruption in God's plan. You are the moment it becomes visible. Because every time you rise after falling, you prove that divine humility is stronger than human failure. You don't need to climb back to heaven. Heaven already came down to you. And in that descent, something unthinkable happened. Holiness became human, and mercy found a face. Not one that looked untouchable, but one that looked like yours. Eyes tired from crying, hands scarred by living. So the next time you feel unworthy, remember this: the light you're ashamed to face is already kneeling at your feet, washing away the dust of every mistake you thought disqualified you. That's not religion, that's resurrection. Power in heaven's hands never looks like dominance, it looks like surrender. The throne that once ruled galaxies became an altar made of dust and blood and love. The king who could command stars into being chose instead to wash the feet of the ones who would doubt him. You see, judgment builds walls, but mercy builds tables. Where justice demands distance, grace invites closeness. And in that moment, the moment the divine knelt, the throne of authority became the place of intimacy. The world expected a ruler. Heaven sent a redeemer. Imagine the angels watching, their wings trembling with awe. They had seen God create, they had seen him command, but never had they seen him kneel. Never had eternity folded itself into humility so complete that even the ground beneath it began to glow. That altar was not made of gold or stone, it was made of choice. The choice to love beyond reason, to forgive before being asked, to trade glory for touch. Because real divinity doesn't stay untouchable. It becomes reachable, it becomes human, it becomes love that doesn't just shine, it serves. And from that altar, mercy began to ripple through time. Every act of kindness, every undeserved second chance, every time you were comforted when you didn't deserve it, that was heaven remembering its own posture. The same light that once bowed in holy humility still kneels beside every broken heart today, still washes the dust of despair from the feet of those too tired to keep walking. So when you fall again, and you will, don't picture a throne looking down on you. Picture an altar beside you. Picture the hands that once shaped worlds, gently lifting your chin. Because love doesn't stand back waiting for you to rise. Love kneels first. There was a day when heaven stopped singing. The angels, who once filled eternity with sound, fell quiet because something unthinkable was happening. The Creator had lowered himself into creation's grief. The light that once commanded galaxies was now kneeling in the dust of its own design. That silence was not emptiness, it was reverence. It was the sound of eternity holding its breath as mercy rewrote the rules of holiness. For the first time, heaven did not hover above humanity. It joined its ache. God didn't watch your suffering, he entered it. He didn't explain the pain, he carried it. That is why the silence of heaven is never distance, it's concentration. It's the moment before transformation begins. When the divine kneels, the universe goes still, not in confusion but in awe. You've felt that kind of silence before. When your prayers seemed to vanish into air, when your world collapsed without warning, when no comfort could touch what broke. You thought heaven had gone quiet out of disinterest, but it was the silence of surgery, the calm before the wound starts to heal. Because mercy doesn't always arrive with sound. Sometimes it arrives with stillness. The stillness that holds you when words would only hurt more. The stillness that listens longer than anyone ever has. That day, heaven's quiet became the language of love. A love that refused to shout over your pain, choosing instead to sit beside it until it passed. So when life grows too quiet again and you wonder where God went, remember this: the same silence that fell that day is the same silence that stands with you now. Heaven hasn't abandoned you. It's just waiting for the moment when mercy will rise again and speak your name. Before there was judgment, there was mercy. Before there was law, there was love. Before the first sin, there was already a savior. Mercy didn't come as a reaction. It came as a design. It was the first language heaven ever spoke. When mercy spoke, the universe paused. Justice held its breath. Because mercy doesn't argue, it interrupts. It stands between the wound and the consequence and says, "Not yet. Let grace speak first." That's what happened the day heaven bent low. The voice that could command oceans chose instead to whisper peace. The hands that could tear down worlds chose instead to heal the broken. Every act of compassion you've ever known was born from that moment, when God decided love would always have the first word. You've felt that voice before. It's the one that said, "Try again," when you thought your story was over. It's the one that whispered, "Come home," when shame told you to hide. It's the one that gently pulled you out of your guilt and reminded you that forgiveness was written long before your failure. Mercy doesn't wait for your apology to begin its work. It starts moving the moment your heart begins to ache. It doesn't need your perfection, just your permission. Because when you open your heart, even a little, mercy rushes in like light through cracks in a wall. And once mercy speaks, nothing can unhear it. Not sin, not memory, not fear. Because mercy doesn't just talk, it transforms. It changes the sound of your own voice until you begin to speak to yourself with kindness again. It rewires your heart so that even in failure, you still lean toward love. So the next time your mind begins to accuse you, remember who spoke first. Remember the kneeling light. Remember that before justice could even raise its voice, grace had already taken the floor and whispered your name in the language of eternity. The ground was ordinary. Dirt, dust, earth, the same ground that holds footprints, that buries dreams, that swallows tears without returning them. But the day heaven knelt, even the ground remembered its creator. What was once cursed by sweat and sorrow became holy again. When mercy touched the earth, it didn't choose marble floors or golden temples. It chose the place where the lost stood. It chose your story, the messy, unfiltered parts, the moments you never told anyone. Because God doesn't avoid what is unclean, He transforms it by touching it. The divine doesn't fear contamination, it brings restoration. That's what happens when heaven kneels. The common becomes sacred. The ordinary becomes eternal. The same dirt you thought was your grave becomes the soil where new life begins. And in that meeting of light and dust, shame loses its vocabulary. You are standing on that same ground now. Every time you choose forgiveness over pride, every time you show kindness instead of judgment, heaven kneels again through you. The light bends, the earth remembers, and the world is reminded that God's greatest miracles happen low to the ground. The angels still talk about that day, the day their king left the throne to touch the soil. They say creation itself trembled, not in fear but in recognition, because mercy was returning home. The light that formed the earth had finally touched it again, not to punish, but to heal. And now that same ground carries your steps. Everywhere you walk, heaven walks with you. Every breath you take, mercy breathes with you. Because when heaven kneels, it never stands back up and leave. It stays in the dust with the redeemed until every shadow learns how to shine again. After the kneeling came the rising, not of pride, not of vengeance, but of restoration. The same hands that once pressed into the earth began to lift everything the world called lost. Heaven didn't rise to prove its power. It rose to prove that love cannot stay on the ground forever. Those hands were scarred but steady. They had known creation and crucifixion, dust and divinity. And when they opened again, light poured out, not to blind, but to build. Because that's what mercy does. It bends to heal and then lifts to rebuild. You have felt those hands before, the moment peace returned after a long night, the moment you found laughter again in a room that once held only grief. That was heaven, lifting, not removing the past, but redeeming it, piece by piece, tear by tear, memory by memory. There is a strange power in those hands. They do not force, they invite. They do not demand, they welcome. They do not hold tight, they hold safe. And when they touch your story, even the parts you buried in shame begin to bloom again under their warmth. When heaven lifted, the angels watched the earth rise with it. Every forgiven soul became a new constellation. Every act of mercy, a spark in the divine tapestry. And now, when the world looks at you, it doesn't just see a survivor. It sees a piece of heaven that learned how to stand again. So when you feel small, when life pushes you low again, remember, kneeling was never the end. It was the beginning of rising. The same hands that reached down once are still beneath you, steady as light. And they will lift you again, not back to what you were, but into what grace has been shaping all along. When heaven rose again, it didn't sit on power, it sat on compassion. The throne that once symbolized distance now pulsed with presence. For the first time, eternity ruled not from above, but from among, and the crown of judgment was replaced with the crown of understanding. Mercy took the throne quietly. No trumpets, no armies, no grand announcements. Just light, steady, patient, endless light filling every space that once held fear. Because real authority doesn't shout, it heals. It doesn't demand obedience, it inspires surrender. You can feel that reign even now. Every time forgiveness wins over bitterness, mercy sits higher. Every time you choose gentleness over anger, heaven expands. Every time love refuses to quit, the throne glows brighter. Justice didn't disappear, it bowed. It understood that to restore the world, something greater had to lead. So mercy stepped forward, not to erase the law, but to fulfill it with love. And in that moment, the universe remembered its true center. Not fear, not order, but grace. The angels call this the Great Exchange. The day power learned humility and holiness learned empathy. The day the Almighty traded distance for closeness. And from that day on, every soul that dared to believe became a living reflection of that throne, a reminder that mercy reigns best when it lives inside the hearts of those it has forgiven. And now when heaven looks upon you, it doesn't see a subject, it sees kin. It doesn't count your flaws, it counts your becoming. Because when mercy took the throne, your name was written into its foundation, and every heartbeat since has been the sound of heaven ruling through love. When heaven finally stood up again, it didn't rise in glory, it rose in gentleness. The light that had once knelt to touch the earth now carried the fragrance of forgiveness. Every particle of dust it had touched, every life it had lifted, shimmered within it like memories of mercy fulfilled. The angels watched in silence, their wings lowered, their eyes full of awe. They had seen creation, they had seen judgment, but never had they seen love return home carrying so many souls. The throne was not polished gold anymore. It was made of hearts restored, of names redeemed, of stories rewritten by compassion. And as heaven stood, it carried the posture of those it had saved, a softness, a patience, a holy humility that can only be learned through pain. The divine no longer spoke from above the storm. It spoke from within it. Because once heaven kneels, it never forgets how to speak the language of those who cry. Now mercy rules without needing to prove itself. The light still kneels, not in defeat but in devotion. It bows each morning when the sun touches the horizon, each night when the moon blesses the silence. It reminds the world, power without love is noise, but love on its knees is the sound of eternity. And somewhere inside you, that same light still bends low. It waits to lift someone through your kindness, to shine through your gentleness, to kneel again through your compassion. Because heaven's greatest miracle was not that it stood up, but that it taught you how to rise with it. So stand now, child of mercy. Stand, carrying the light that once carried you. You are not the one who was rescued. You are the continuation of the rescue, and as heaven watches, smiling through your eyes, the voice of eternity whispers once more, the light that kneeled for you still kneels through you.